Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Hello everybody. Feels slightly odd to have just finished editing this podcast because we recorded this a few weeks ago and we actually met today's guests at the Lightweight Adventurous Festival, and they turned out to be every bit as lovely as I thought they were going to be. We've got Nick and Beth, who are Munduro de Tontos on Instagram, and they talk us through their trip from Dallas, where they had their bikes shipped to, through to Central America, and there will be a second leg where they continue their journey through to the very southern tip of Argentina. Nick and Beth, you may know from a crowdfunder campaign that Charlie set up after they'd been robbed in Belize. So they talk us through what happened there and the very positive outcomes of all those goings on. It's a big, old, lovely world out there, and they're a great example of not letting a horrible incident spoil the rest of their trip and their views on the world as a whole. They're excellent people. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Let's get on with it. Do you think you deserve the beration?
No, because I don't touch any of these dials.
You move the microphone every week.
I move the microphone every week. You do that, yeah.
Which is mainly what it is.
If you go a bit closer, it just sounds a bit sexy. Low undertones coming out.
I've tried doing that, Nick.
Now we're talking.
Wow.
I get these awful little things on Facebook showing me Jay. Have you heard of Jay Shetty?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does a sickly podcast where he gets celebs in to talk to him. They can talk like this and everything's fine. But not us. We have to be like kissing the mic.
Did it go a bit robotic just about 5-10 seconds ago?
That's just Noel talking as normal.
I'm Beth Hall. I'm a science teacher in secondary schools. Me and Nick, we met about 3 years ago. This is a bit of an odd one. I had a dream before I met Nick that essentially after my 2 years of training as a teacher, they essentially, in my dream, they said, oh, you should go travelling. And then I thought, oh, yeah, let's go travelling. I really wanted a challenge. So I was looking for a challenge. I'd been travelling before. I've done lots of travelling, but it wasn't until Nick, probably about 2 years into our relationship, Nick had a DRZ that he'd spent quite a lot of time on. It was just on the driveway, kind of just being really dusty and hadn't been used, and I'd asked him about it.
It's that special orange dust called rust. So
And whenever I asked Nick about it, he'd always get really, really sad and just, well, what would you say?
Oh, don't talk about that. Let's move on. Yeah, it was an aspiration of mine, and then the project is, one of those things where it's like, I'll just tinker with this, but while I'm doing that, I may as well take the handlebars off, and while I've got the handlebars off, I'll do this. And you realise that everything on a bike is kind of a bit connected until the whole thing's in parts in your front room. You put it back together again, and then 1 year later, your life's moved on, and you realise that maybe it was all not going to happen anyway. Yeah. So put it under a tarp and forgot about it for a while, and then I met Beth.
Had you bought it with the intention of travel then, or just to trail ride, or just to tinker with?
God, how do I put this into perspective? Yonks ago, I cycled across Europe and fell in love with the idea of going long distance on two wheels. And then as soon as I could afford, I bought a motorbike, did a few trips around Europe on my dad's FJ 1200, which ran into more than a few issues with that. I mountain bike quite avidly as a youth, and so I thought, well, the best way to combine all that must be overland, long distance, with a motorbike that can go off-road. So I hit the stat sheets pretty hard and concluded that the DRZ is the only way forward.
So can I just stop you there? And I don't mean to be pedantic, but I am going to be pedantic.
I wasn't going to mention it. You're going to mention it, aren't you?
DRZ. Is it an American import?
It's actually a Canadian import.
Oh, fuck. You're allowed to say it then.
It's a legitimate Z.
It's a legitimate Z, yeah. It's first registered in the UK in 2011, but manufactured in 2006, which causes great fun at borders. I give them either and wait them to work it out, and then sometimes they kick a fuss.
Are you going to let them carry on then, Clive, with the Z?
Yeah, absolutely. They've legitimised the Americanism, Canadianism.
It's actually a DRZ SM.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the letter Z. Didn't it break down on the way to the airport to be shipped?
Oh, God.
Only 3 times, actually.
Jeez.
I've never been so doubtful about anything in my life, Clive.
There's signs And then there's breaking down 3 times on the way to the airport. And Beth, can I just go back? When you said I'm quite a literal person, perhaps, and when you said I had a dream, you didn't actually mean you had a dream in the night. You had a dream of doing this thing.
No, I was actually quite literal. I literally had a dream.
Really?
Someone like 2 years older than me. They came and told me that I should be a teacher. And then I thought, yeah, I've already thought about being a teacher. Then they said, right, after you finish being a teacher, go travelling. I thought, well, okay, yeah, I don't need to be told twice about that. I'd love to go travelling. Why wouldn't I go travelling? And in the dream, they were very, very, very insistent that I went travelling.
And you say you're a science teacher.
Dreams are just parts of you that, because I went to bed that night wondering what to do with my life. And then obviously I got a dream that...
Your subconscious knew exactly what you should be doing with the rest of your life. That's it.
Well, I decided that's what I wanted to go for, yeah.
My subconscious is always saying, you need to buy another motorbike.
Yeah,
and it's generally
exactly.
right. Yeah.
Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself before you started travelling. What were you up to?
Well, I'm a doctor, a motorcyclist, and what else am I? I don't know. I was going to say a naughty boy then. It was Monty Python came to my head. I was actually born in Germany, moved back to the UK when I was a young nip around 10. I spent a lot of time in Lancashire, where I grew up, and then slowly got sucked into the south before we went gallivanting.
Are you a GP-type doctor or a hospital-type doctor?
A mildly complicated question. I'm a real doctor, not a physics doctor. I'm a junior hospital doctor, I think is the easiest way to put it.
So you've had your dream, Beth. You did a bit of research before you set off. Was there anybody in particular that inspired you and helped you decide where to go and what to do?
I'd never ridden a bike before I met Nick. I don't know, when I was very, very young, I'd always found the idea quite alluring, but I sort of told myself that was very silly and that, it's very dangerous and not acceptable. Then Nick literally turned up outside of my school to pick me up, because at that point I didn't have any transport, I was getting the train, and he turns up with a Van 125 and says, "Here you go, do you like it?" And then steps off the bike falls off onto the grass, and then he goes, "There you go, do you like your new bike?"
It was even more, not melodramatic, of an anticlimax than that, wasn't it? I did my finest skiddy on the grass outside Beth's school, put the side stand down, so that's why it hit the ground. It sunk straight in, picked it up, hit the start button, and got absolutely nothing, and then said, don't worry, it's not all dead yet, we'll have to bump it in front of your school." I literally just picked it up from the guy on eBay, bump started, said hop on the back, and then where do I put my feet? Oh, it's got no side pegs, just wrap those round me. And then...
Is there anything cool about this story? Were you carrying a spare helmet and Beth put the helmet on and then you rode out of the schoolyard?
Officer and a gentleman style.
I did have a spare helmet.
And I must say, when I did my CBT, I fell in love with riding, absolutely fell in love with riding. I didn't realise I was going to love it that much, but I really, I would come home after riding from work and just have an absolute ridiculous grin on my face. And I've had that ever since. And when Nick turned around and said, "Oh, we can ride across country or across continent doing this," I was like, I absolutely want to do that.
Did you keep the Van for a while?
Regretfully sold the van just before we left, which was a hole in our hearts that it left, really.
The van was it was with us for about a year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You did like it?
I fell in love with it. It's just a ridiculously fun, silly bike that you can just...
Yeah, it's incredibly fun. We then got the rally, and the DRZ was still a work in progress, even months just before we set off. It was on fire.
This is the CRF 300 rally, right?
Yeah, and at that point, you hadn't got your big licence.
No.
We were still months away. So I was riding the rally behind you down the green lanes, and then when you got your licence, we swapped, and I was like, God, I missed the van. Even though you've got more ground clearance, suspension, yada, yada, yada on the rally, there's something just addictive about something with a low seat height, rattly suspension, a 10 horsepower that's just all torque, and a tractor tyre on the back that just does put a grin on your face. God, if I had to do it again, I think I wouldn't buy anything that's got the label adventure on it, and buy a van and stick some panniers on the back and be done with it.
The Yamaha TW, that's a similar thing, isn't it? And that comes with a slightly bigger engine.
They still make it.
When we looked, there was at least 2016 on Regis, but I don't know if they've discontinued since then. We actually almost bought one again last week.
So that's another story.
Yeah, we had one more bike in the UK, which again we almost sold before we set off. I thought that's our backup bank account, and we were kind of relieved that we didn't, because it was our mode of transport when we came back this time around. But it was stolen a couple of metres from where we were asleep, right beneath our noses overnight.
Was that just recently? Then?
Yeah, that was
2 weeks ago, 1 week ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
What is going on? It's just unbelievable, isn't it? The amount of bikes getting stolen.
It's quite impressive. We were in a van. I mean, everything you can hear, right? You know, there's nothing really insulating us that from sound. Slept right through it.
So I was stunned.
Quite shocked that, I mean, they're obviously professionals, weren't they? They knew what they were doing.
So what, did it have a few devices on it?
There was nothing solid to bolt it to. I've since found something underneath the van, so a replacement is secured to our van, but otherwise...
We had a chain around the back wheel, but it wasn't fixed onto anything, which is, you know, a lesson learnt for next time.
So let's get on to happier matters. Tell us about your trip. How did you start? It looks like you shipped to America.
Yeah, the United States of America, which we actually had, and no offence to any I say Americans, United States of Americans, because be careful how you use the A word over there. We shipped to Texas because it was the closest place to the Mexican border, and we hadn't done much field research on which part of Mexico we wanted to ride through, so that was it. That was as far as our decision making went.
There's a trend. There's not, you know, we kind of just sort of head into unknowing and sort of work it out from there.
So what's the process then for shipping your bike over to Texas? Because we've had quite a few people have shipped to Canada. That seems quite a popular route.
It's fairly easy. I just had a company that felt a bit almost too lax. They were just sort of like, yeah, book your tickets for your flights, and tell us the dates. And they were like, right, that's fine. Bring your bikes to our shipping place a week before with hardly any petrol in. So then that was all fine. So they had some documents, all that sort of stuff, and then flew them over, and then we had to go get them, didn't we?
Yeah, actually dropping them off and shipping them was easy. It was
chill.
all packaging.
But picking them up was a bit difficult.
You'd be surprised because I think our company was really good. They're like, here's all the paperwork you need. There's some additional copies of forms in case you need them, and they asked for them here. So we came with an arsenal of paperwork. I'm like, this is going to be fine. And they just turn around and go, have you got your shipping invoice? I'm like, what do you mean? I just need the word invoice on the paper and then the word Suzuki DRZ. And I'm like, okay.
And the value.
I don't care about any of the other paperwork you've got, just that. Just one. And I was like, okay, can I write that out for you? No, it must be printed. I'm like, okay, but just to clarify, it has the word invoice and then the name of the bike. That is all, but it has to be printed. I'm like, can I use your printer? No. Can I email something to you to print it, to put it back to me and I'll sign it? No. Dallas Airport is huge and we have no internet, no way of booking a taxi.
And
so no transport there. And the shipping company helped us out, but it took the whole day just to get that one piece of paper that said the word invoice on it. You think you can plan for these things, but it doesn't matter. Look at the drawer.
At the end of all that, did you actually hand the invoice over to that person you'd had that whole conversation with?
Yeah, and then there was a supervisor pulled from the back. And that was it funny because we didn't need a temporary import for the States, is that right? Because our intention was to be there less than
Correct.
12 months,
yeah.
I think. He was just saying, I don't want to attempt a Texan accent, but just said, this is all just hearsay, the fact you're leaving America and you're heading for the Mexican border. Are you crazy? And I'm like, and I almost said like, why would I want to stay in Texas? And I didn't want to aggravate him too much.
Did that end up being a mistake in your view, or?
No, I mean, our shipping company said don't ship to Mexico because we've had clients get held up weeks with getting it out. So I think just the 1 day debacle was fairly good going for us.
Why is it so difficult?
Every single place has its own little nuance and way of doing things, and it's just so funny, like the sort of documents that you need in one place and in the other place you use completely different documents.
I think our friend Ollie did it right. We met a lovely German chap for Christmas dinner in Oaxaca in Central America. He had a 1950-something Zundap 50cc scooter that he was going transcontinental on. But because it's registered as a power-assisted, again, don't quote me on this, a power-assisted motorcycle rather than a vehicle, he didn't need to import it, so he just took it apart, put it in his hold luggage, got on the plane as you would do, and then assembled it in the airport maybe, but on the other side.
I think it's called doing an Ed March, isn't it? I think he did that with his 90, yeah. You said before, just remind me, how long had you given yourself for this whole trip?
6 months.
6 months, eight months latest. And that was based off long way round, down and up.
Yes.
They just thrash it out in 3 months, don't they? And you think, all right, double that. That seems reasonable. Not the way to do it.
It's just not the way we would do it. So many things that you get distracted with on the way, and people say, go over here, and you want to go down this little route. You don't really take a sort of straight route. You don't really stay on we don't really like being on the Pan-American highway, do we?
No. We did make it difficult for ourselves because I'd spend hours looking at a map and looking for small dirt roads that vaguely connect up and talking to people and getting a feel of whether it's a good idea or looking for the adventurous option.
And sometimes no roads.
Is that not a good way to do it?
Yeah,
I mean, that is the way to do it.
That's the adventure. That's the, for us, that's what we enjoy.
You do also seem to do an awful lot of fun things as well, like spend a lot of time on volcanoes, snowboarding down lava, climbing, walking through forest fires, filming dead dogs with vultures eating them, milking really scary cows. Just some examples.
Don't talk to me about cows. It's the only thing I'm scared of. You do. I mean, the way that we've travelled is you bump people on the way. There's a lot of WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups that have people doing the similar things. You kind of share information. A lot of people end up collecting various pinpoints. I need to go here. I've got a recommendation for this route. I need to go climb up this volcano. And before you know it, you're connecting dots rather than doing I'm getting from this point in the continent to this point in the continent, and therefore everything just kind of falls into place in front of you. A lot of volcanoes. If you look at a map of Central America and put it onto relief mode, I don't know the name of the fault, but a lot of it's relatively flat with just a line of cones going down the west coast. Inevitably, you're kind of drawn to those as just waypoints, really.
I mean, you're drawn to them because obviously it's also just really, really hot. So you want to just always go up in altitude so that it's, somewhat bearable. We'd often spend quite a few days up in altitude, and then we'd come back down to the sea or sea level or the beach, thinking it would be lovely. And every single time that we went down, we were just like, "Oh my god, this is really hard."
There's just something about being in the hills, and especially on a motorbike. I always think it's a lovely. The smells are better.
Yes,
it's just a nicer atmosphere, isn't it? Somehow. Aside from the temperature, it's just a nicer place to be, I think.
The altitude is a huge thing in Central America and Mexico, and we didn't really realise it, but it's all down to the relative altitude. Mexico City is at 2,400, 500, but it's still quite hot. If you're at the coast and in Central America and you go up to 1,000 metres, you get enough drop in temperature that it's then palatable again. We found ourselves planning our routes around altitude.
I'm just going to open up my maps because it's always confusing to someone who hasn't travelled in that part of the world exactly what's where. I bet you're very familiar with it now. Obviously, you've travelled through it.
Tell us a little bit more about the geography and the sequence of the trip. So obviously you started in Dallas, Texas. Did you ride straight out of America into Mexico? What's your route through Central America?
Speaking to more people that have done, I think a more classic route is Alaska to Argentina or in reverse. And I think a lot of people gravitated to the west coast, and so a lot of people go through the Baja in Mexico, so that's the most western part. We didn't, just through the lack of decision making and taking the closest point to the border. And so we went essentially almost directly south from Texas to cross the border.
It took about a week, didn't we?
It took about a week, just hopping the national parks.
Shot some guns, and then crossed the border into the county's called Coahuila. Definitely don't quote me on that pronunciation. And then again, we were just dotting the line, so to speak. But a lot of people don't go close to the east side of Mexico generally. Yeah.
And so we hadn't actually seen another gringo for 2 months, I'd say, almost, until we got into Oaxaca. Not a well-trodden touristy part of Mexico.
And the people there were, so happy to see us. They were so friendly and so welcoming, and we had so many different chats. We had, do you remember the mechanics that you stopped outside? And they were really trying to help you with your suspension. And then I had 2 teachers that had just come out and just saw me on the side of the road and just came and gave me coffee. And it was really lovely, wasn't it?
Did people recognise it as a UK plate, do you think?
Again, I don't want to offend the Americans. I really don't. I was close to putting the words "I'm not American," or at least in Spanish, on the back of my plate. So a lot of people, I think, jump to that as soon as you speak English fluently and not with a very obvious European accent. I think most people's response is, "Oh, wait, you're not American," and they notice that you haven't got an American accent, and then they actually get quite excited.
Mexico's massive, though, isn't it? A lot of people just think of it as a gateway to Central America, but it's a huge country. How long were you in Mexico for?
2 months. And actually, Nick, you were saying that you thought that Mexico was just all desert.
My impression for the movies is it's going to be one big desert, and there's going to be cowboys and people slinging guns and cactuses and tequila. That's what I thought Mexico was. Completely wrong.
So wrong.
I don't suppose, Clive or Noel, you've ever played the game Minecraft or aware of it?
No, too old for that.
Yeah, well, it's a computer-based game, but the world's kind of chopped up into what they call biomes. So you go from being in the desert to being in the jungle to being on a beach to being in the plains to being in the swamp, etc., etc. And I think Mexico's the closest thing to Minecraft that I've seen, where in the space of one day you can go through riding this flat expanse of cactuses to suddenly you're actually in a rainforest, and then next thing you know it, and you're in a swamp, and it happens so quickly. The line is so straight between these and you just don't know what's ahead of you. So it's an incredibly diverse place, and I think a lot of people could and do spend the whole
Some people get
travels,
stuck at Mexico and they don't want to leave. There's a few
We spoke a lot of van lifers who they have been in Mexico for years, and I still haven't seen all of it. So it's a huge, incredibly diverse place. It's not just deserts and cowboys.
But I suppose being on the East Coast necessitated a journey through Belize. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. I think we were slightly curious as well.
That's where it got a bit interesting, right?
Yeah. Belize, from what we heard, is very much like Marmite from the other motorcyclists that had been through and that had messaged us or we through social media and stuff. In the fact that you either hate it or you love it. And I think we loved it until we hated it.
Yeah.
To put it succinctly.
It was very interesting culture-wise, because you go into, and not a lot of people know this, but you go into Belize and it's English-speaking, and there's the Queen on the money. The whole of Central America, otherwise, is Spanish. And so that's, at first that was, very bizarre, wasn't it? There's like lots of different cultures that are almost like not mixing as well as they would do in, the rest of Central America countries.
You've got an Ammonite population, there's various Asian populations, there's at least, I think our friend told us there's 6 Mayan populations, you've got people coming over the border from Guatemala, you've got the influence of the colonial stages, so you've got some kind of Western influence there, as well as an Afro-Caribbean population from the colonial times as well, all kind of thrust into this
tiny space.
Whereas a lot of the rest of Central America is Mayan populations mixing with the Spanish populations, but Belize is very a hot mixing pot, isn't it?
Yeah, but we were told to sort of keep an eye out in Belize. So we had in Mexico done quite a bit of wild camping, and we were loving the wild camping, and we thought, okay, well now we're in Belize, and some people have said to sort of be a bit careful about Belize. We were like, right, we won't wild camp, we'll camp in established campsites. That was what we did in Belize, wasn't it?
I'll leave it up to you to tell us what you want to tell us about the incident. We're not journalists, we're not looking for a story, so just share it in your own words.
We were staying in a campsite that was recommended by another campsite owner that had more than a number of good reviews, owned by an American guy. It had a large fence separating it from the roads. It had a car park, security lights, and he was in the process of starting the business up. So on site, he had already set up various tents on platforms. He built a kitchen, the shower and the bathroom, and he had 3 workers with him as well. He offered, said, "Look, guys, you can come stay for a few nights. The business just going." And so that was our setting, and we'd stayed there for an extra night because we were hoping to do a tour of the very famous cave in Belize. And then I suppose flash forward to best estimates 1-2 a.m. and we just had torches in our face shouting, it's the police, and all we could see was the barrel of a gun reflecting in torchlight and the distinct line of reflection of a machete. I don't know if you've ever been broken that rudely, and especially with someone shouting the police at you, you're a bit disorientated, especially when you're used to waking up somewhere else every day. My actually first reaction was, "You're not the police. Show me your badge."
Well, I was going to say, at that point, did you doubt it was the police? And you did straight away doubt that it was actually the police.
My gut feeling was the police wouldn't just wake you up in the night pointing a gun at you. I think the rest of me was probably just literally waking up and not orientated. The response to that was, "We're not fucking around," and then the machete was just drawn several times over the tent so that we were just a still torchlight, still blinded, getting rains on in our pants, and we were just physically hauled.
I think the first thing I did, because Nick woke me up when it was happening, and then the first thing I did was put a t-shirt on. Then the slashing was happening, and then we were sort of pulled out, and I had no shoes on, and they wanted me to walk across like this sort of jungly kind of like leaves and brambles and things like that. And the first thing I said, I was like, "Can I put some shoes on?" And they were like, "No, you've got more things to worry about that." And they sort of like tugged my arm, and I said, no, I really am worried about the scorpions. I really don't want to be bitten by the scorpions. And then I think at which point they just dragged me to the top of the sort of, I don't know, hill.
How many people did it look like at this point?
There was 6 assailants.
6, but there were 5 originally. One guy with a gun, and then the rest of them got machetes. And they're all dressed up in balaclavas, you can only see their eyes, and they've got torches and machetes, and they're all like in army camo kind of outfits. The first thing is you get brought up to the hill, and it's not until I remember seeing everyone else, like the owner and the 2 workers, being tied up. And then I saw 2 other guys, I think, surrounding these guys with their machetes. And then that's for me when I realised the situation that I was in. And I think the first thing I did was, what the fuck is this? I dropped to my knees and was just like, holy fucking shit, this is absolutely fucking insane. I think I was being the loudest and talking the most. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I don't want to be involved in it. I want to get out of this as soon as possible. I just started talking at them.
Trying to appease them or taking them on, or in what way?
My first reaction was just, this is clearly a mistake. You've got me and Nick are just tourists, this whatever this is, I don't think we're meant to be a part of it. That was my first thing. And then my second thing I started saying was, at this point they tied me up. So they were tying me up and they tied Nick up. And then I said, what do you want? Do you want money? Is that what you want? And then they were like, yes, show us where the money is. So then at this point they untied me, and then they took me back to the tent. And this was like with 4 other guys. As I'm walking back to the tent, there's 2 guys there, and they are like, I've never seen anything like it, like panic. You know when you're so panicked, you're not even able to look for anything because you're just throwing things everywhere. That's what they were doing. They were like throwing things everywhere. It was just absolute carnage. So I walked into the tent, and then one of the things they kept on saying was they were really worried about me.
Drugs and
show me where the drugs.
Drugs and guns.
Have you got guns?
Where are your drugs and guns?
Have you got guns or drugs? Guns or drugs? And they were obviously, I could really sense how scared they were, and that obviously made me feel really quite scared. They're worried that I'm going to suddenly flash out a gun because that's how scared they are right now. So I'm like constantly saying to them, like, I'm being very slow. Here are my hands. I'm looking around trying to find some money of mine, and then I eventually find the purse, and then I give them the money that I have, and they're like, do you have anything else? I was like, no, that's all I've got, unfortunately. And then I think I had a crystal in my purse as well, and I was like, do you want this? Like a really like crap quartz crystal.
50p quartz crystal that was given to us.
I think the guy took it.
Well, it sounds like he might need all the good karma it would bring him, the prick.
Then I was brought back to the circle again. There was like this sort of like charade where they were like, where are the guns? Where are the drugs? Where is the money? Is that right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they bring up one of our bags, a little backpack that we carry around with us.
Rewind to Texas, we had walked into a shooting range and thought, brilliant, we can go see one of those deep south shooting ranges where they're all gunslinging, ammunition obsessed Texans, which it was. And I said, oh, can I have an empty shell to take with me as a souvenir? It's not a live round, is it? I don't want to be carrying this across borders. Turns out it's not a great idea anyway. But he said, no, of course it's not live. That's all legal. It's just an empty metal shell. So I took one line 121, one whatever it is in the middle, which one of each, which they excavated out the bottom of one of our bags and was like, aha, you're lying to us, you must have guns because you've got rounds.
My heart dropped. I was like, holy
oh,
fuck,
shit.
This is not a good idea.
I think you asked earlier, talking back for what point. I wasn't particularly scared, I was more angry, and I think I knew that I was treading a line of some level of assertance and some you have to hold your story, hold your line. But if you antagonize them too much, then you're putting your physical health at risk. And yes, I was battered quite hard, but at the same time, I didn't want it to escalate, and I didn't want it to escalate to where they could have harmed Beth.
Was the owner helping? Was he talking much or trying to...
2 of the workers were sobbing really hard. They were terrified.
They were from across the board from Guatemala, and Belize and Guatemala have a history of warfare, from my understanding, and I think they'd been as a part of that. My best guess is they were quite triggered from being in a dark jungle with men coming out with machetes.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously terrifying anyway.
Did at any point were you actually fearing for your lives, or were you just thinking this is a robbery, they'll take everything they want and then it'll be over?
That's a really good question, because there's a part of you that's terrified, I think, for me. You think, oh my god, there is no idea what's going to happen. I'm essentially just, if they got really scared or someone ran off, or something happened, then I could be just, in the crossfire, right? It got to the point where they were like holding the knife to my neck and they were saying, if you don't tell us where the gun is, we're going to slash your girlfriend's neck. And then there's a gun in each of the back of our heads going, we're going to count to 3. If no one tells us where the gun is, we're going to shoot you. The first few times you're like, well, this is absolutely terrifying. And you come to a point where you kind of almost surrender because you're like, there's not much I can do at this point. All I just have to do is just be part of it. I'm just there. I'm just experiencing it. And then after a while, for me, it was like a knowing that I was like, they're probably not going to kill us.
Yeah.
They don't have any desire to. They're really scared as well.
That's what made it scary, is we knew that they were scared. I think.
And they weren't very intelligent either.
From what the police told us afterwards, that this gang has been active on a monthly basis. We don't think we were explicitly targeted because someone saw our bikes parked out and thought there must be some tourists with some fancy cameras. Over an hour into this incident, which what we're describing was over the course of 3 hours, that they found our keys. What are the keys for? We must have bikes. So
Where are the bikes?
We were just completely in the wrong place at the wrong time, and either it was just a random attack on a rural setting, or some history going on with that area, or the owner, or that's related, that we were just not supposed to be there.
I think for me, my biggest worry was being raped. That was my biggest worry. I didn't think that I was going to be killed.
I was weighing that up. I was like, well, how much do I resist physically to try and stop that? Well, I can with my hands being tied. And I was like, well, would I accept a loss of a limb to stop that from happening? I probably would. Would I take being battered in the head a few times? I will. And I did.
And you were very badly beaten.
I struck a few times, and the 2 biggest blows were, just like in the movies, back of the gun to the head and steel toe cap to the side of the face when you're on the ground. I walked into the embassy, the British embassy, the next morning, probably looking in a right state.
I mean, this is a silly question, Nick, but had you been hit in the face before this?
Oh, not since schoolboy rugby, to be honest.
Because it must be a shock. Especially if it's the first time.
At this point, you're wet, shivering in your pants in the jungle, just trying to rationalise everything. The actual physical pain wasn't too much of a concern, to be honest. I remember when I got struck on the back of the head, just trying to think to myself, did I lose consciousness? Such a doctor thing to do, isn't it? Finally, after hours, they finally let us be, and we escaped. I returning to Beth and saying, I've got a concussion.
Yes.
Which means I cannot hold on to 2 bits of information, so I need you to guide me out of this. I can otherwise function, but I've got a concussion. I can hold on to 2 bits. Wait, have I said this already? Never mind.
Nick's very on it. He's always the logical part of any sort of adventure that we're on. He's always able to rationalise, give me all the options and things like that, and having him on the end of it being like, I can't hold 2 things at once, I'm repeating myself, I'm looking off into the distance. I was like, oh my god.
After they left us, we were tied up in the tent, left to urinate to the best of our abilities with our hands tied. No more questions there, please. And then we did manage to contact the police, and they turned up for albeit 20 minutes. When the campsite owner came back and said they've left us, and we have but we've got no communications. We're at the site of the crime, and they've got our primary keys to our bikes, which thank God they didn't take. I don't know if they couldn't or they didn't realise it was a bad idea.
I mean, that's another thing.
And we were like, we have to get the fuck out of here immediately, because I don't know if the Belizean police are incompetent or corrupt, but that is just incredibly suspicious, and I'm not hanging around here for any much longer.
I'm astonished at how long it went on for 3 hours.
It is absolutely ridiculous. You just take your stuff and go. That's what I couldn't really understand.
Was it getting light by the time that they left?
So it gets light at 6 a.m. over there. It gets dark at 6 and gets light at 6 a.m. So
and
it's
I think we got to Bell-on-the-Pan. It's just under an hour drive to the capital city, which we had no map, no communication.
It was really long, and I didn't really understand why it was so long, because that was the bit that was just quite, I think, infuriating for all of us.
Yeah.
They wanted to try and steal the bikes. They did take the keys for a while. Then they kept coming back and asking which keys is it, and then I was very confused and was just like, you have the keys. And then eventually they brought the keys back and then said, here you go, have the keys. I don't know why it took so long. It's very odd.
I'm not going to make jokes about the DRZ not starting. because that wouldn't be appropriate right now.
I had about 7 or 8 keys on my key ring, you know, when you add up, like, you got a separate one for the steering lock, the lock barrel, the toolbox, the panniers, the disc lock, etc., etc. And before you realise it, you've got a whole rack of them. And add to their woes, I completely rewired every button on the handlebar. A custom set. I don't know why in retrospect. So I can carry a spare for every button with just having one. But the result is it kind of looks like the Death Star, you know, in episode 4 when he's got these big red buttons. Not a single one that's labelled star or kill or headlight. So I don't know if that threw them or...
But they didn't steal my bike either.
They didn't. Everyone I think we spoke to afterwards, they approach you like a wounded puppy. They're like, you must be traumatised, you must be broken by this. And okay, I'm not going to lie, for the first week we woke up a few times with machetes in our face, and then, you know, and I'm like, my first thing was like, fuck, I've got PTSD, that's it, I've got mental health problems for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be fighting for this for a while. After the first week, they settled down. It was a lot of anger that came out, and I was more angry that I'm now an angry person because I'm having these violent thoughts in relation to that, and that they've changed me and made me a violent person, because I would never otherwise consider myself it. But since then, the whole thing has been relatively positive after that. We've learned to like start trusting people again after what Charlie did, setting us the GoFundMe, and we've met so many wonderful people in the meantime that it puts it in perspective. There's always do you have a sense of regret about it? And I think, thinking back, I don't particularly think we acted that brash or that like we went wild camping somewhere we shouldn't have been, or really pushing the boundaries. We were actually trying to be cautious at that point. Every time I've replayed the whole scene in my head, I don't think I would have changed something that I did to protect ourselves. I don't regret my actions within the actual episode. So without that regret and without that actually substantial loss and long-standing, I think thanks to everyone and all the support we had afterwards, it has been it's been an incredibly transformative experience, but overall it's not been negative, and I think a lot of people are quite astounded to hear that.
When I had the experience happen to me, I was sort of like, right, well, this is obviously really shit, we're just going to have to just take it as it is and see how it goes. Because I'm a secondary teacher in a sort of public school environment it's a trauma-informed school, so I've done a lot of reading about trauma, I've done a lot of meditation, I've trained as a yoga teacher. I have actually got, interestingly, lots of knowledge about this, and then going through an experience that is, you know, obviously trauma, and then being like, oh, this is what I need to accept how I feel, I need to just, you know, let it all out and all this sort of stuff. And it was very interesting, having already read all about it and then experiencing it was quite interesting for me, and I never really looked for it to be a positive thing. It didn't need to be a positive thing for me. Interestingly, it has been overwhelmingly positive. So one of the things that I struggled with before I had this thing happen to me was I often thought, from my childhood, as maybe many people do experience, is I had this feeling of like, there's something wrong with me, and I used to get quite anxious quite a lot of the times. And interestingly, it's very hard to explain, but that's now gone. It's really gone. I don't even have these thoughts of, oh, there's something wrong with me, and even if I do, I'm very separate from them than I used to be. And I think there was an element when I was in the moment when it was happening, and I realised that all I had was that I had to sort of trust myself. I just realised that I had to make my own mistakes rather than somebody else's mistakes, and start worrying about whether it was right or wrong, and actually just do what I think is best. And whatever mistakes they are, they're my mistakes and nobody else's. That sort of falling in and trusting myself has made my life so much more enjoyable. It's a very odd thing to say, but I'm actually really grateful for it. I don't think you necessarily have to go through that to find those things.
Yeah. You should try it yourself sometime.
But that was the way for me, and that's what happened.
Did you say, Beth, it happened very quickly, that feeling of transformation?
Yeah, it was very in the moment, but I kind of didn't realise it until like maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and I started noticing like lots of things. I would normally have been really anxious and I just wasn't. I would have normally have thought these thoughts, and actually I'm thinking very positive thoughts. So it was like this sort of slow realisation that it kind of already happened, but it was slowly, I've been slowly realising, especially coming back to work as well, noticing how different I've been at work compared to last time. It's been really interesting.
Is part of it perspective? Is it part of it that, well, no matter how bad this is, it's not as bad as being woken up in the night by a man with a machete?
I think maybe that is a part of it. The levels of tolerance of what I can deal with has probably changed a lot. I definitely think that might be part of it as well.
Can we move on to the wonderful Charlie part of this story?
Oh, Charlie.
Oh, Charlie.
So I was already following you anyway, but then a chap called Charlie Reynolds, and you'll tell us his story in a moment, started a fundraising campaign to replace your lost equipment and lost cash.
Don't spoil the story.
I'm not going to, but
Why are you telling the story?
well, I was part of the story, Noel, because I don't, unlike you, I donated. You might have done. No, I say you might have done. I know you didn't fucking donate.
When these things crop up on my computer, I never give to.
It's not about you either.
I give virtually nothing to anyone. But when this was pushed under my nose, and it was Mark Derry that pushed it under my nose, and I was straight on to that. I gave very little, but I did give something because I was so touched by it, like I'm touched by it now.
It was remarkable, and it raised an awful lot of cash in a very short period of time. So well done, the biking community. And I'll shut up now and let you tell the story.
Yes, tell the story.
I have to say, I think the 24 hours after that was launched was probably more of an emotional roller coaster than the night itself.
I agree.
It was the first time I'd cried since the night.
Yeah.
I'd gritted my teeth. I'd had blood drip down my jaw, but I don't think I actually shedded a tear until I woke up that morning and saw it had a grand within, it was a grand within a few hours, and I'm like, you're shitting me, what? I mean, I can go with this. I'm going to go into details why, but I can tell you about Charlie.
Yeah, how did you meet Charlie?
I think what tickles me is that we felt we should respond with a video to that, and we've never sat in front of a camera and spoke to an audience before. It was difficult for us.
This is not how we met Charlie.
I know, but I'm getting there a very circumferential way. And in the first line of that is, we met a random guy on the internet.
Oh, right.
Which actually prompted my mum to send me a text. I'm like, are you sure you can trust this random man on the internet? He's not stealing all your money that all these strangers are giving you. And it was a little bit like that. It was like we put a comment on a Facebook group a long time before it happened, and Charlie had seen that about the Pan American Highway Association or Travellers. He looked at my profile and gone, some guy that snowboards and he's riding a bike, and from his picture he thought I lived in Canada, around where he lives. And hold on a sec, he's riding a bike across Mexico just a week ahead of me. What are the chances? I got a friend request about a few weeks before Belize from a guy called Charlie Reynolds. I look at it and go, I don't know Charlie Reynolds. So I sent him a message back going, sorry mate, have we met? And the next day he responds again, no, we haven't met. And he explained this. He's like, I've just seen your profile, I think we should meet up. I remember turning to Beth and going, this guy's right on our tail. He seems really interesting, seems really nice. We should meet up with him. And then completely forgot about him. Just completely ignored him, completely blanked him. I like, no reason whatsoever apart from that we just got distracted with whatever we were doing.
Well, we got robbed, so.
And then with a week later we got robbed. So it took us a week to get our shit together, so to speak. Our plan was get to Lake Atalan in Guatemala, and if you've been there, you'll know why. It's calming. And then just collect ourselves emotionally and work out what we're going to do. I parked Best bike outside a coffee shop just to go buy some coffee. Charlie comes rattling into the car park on his Honda CRF.
So much energy, that guy.
His grin from his cheek to cheek, and he just shouts, "Is that your bike outside?" I'm like, "It's Beth's bike, actually. Is that your bike that you're riding?" And he's like, "Yes, this is my bike. It's actually very similar to your bike, and you've got a UK plate. Are you from the UK?" And he just starts shouting at us. I'm like, "Sorry, mate. Nice to meet you too." And then he goes, "My name's Charlie," and he's like, "I'm like, my name's Nick." And he's like, "I sent you a message," and I'm like, "Did you? Oh shit, I ignored you." And I picked up my phone, I'm like, "I totally ignored you." He's like, "Don't worry about it." And then, "Do you want to go for a drink?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're having a rough time." So that's how we met Charlie.
Charlie's such a lovely guy. All he thinks about is the positive. All he thinks about is other people and what's the lesson to be learned. And it was an absolute incredible time meeting Charlie, just meeting him. I think one of the first things he said was, "I have heard about your story and I'm really sorry. I just want you to know you've done nothing wrong and you're just really unlucky." And he's just a lovely guy.
Did he make you think differently? Because I'd imagine you would have almost certainly had the thoughts of, right, fuck this, let's just go home, back to my safe European home. Did meeting him and what he did for you, did that change your view on what you should do?
For me, it didn't change my view on what I should do. I think I came out of Belize just distrusting everyone's eyes and hating everyone and hating that feeling that you can't meet people and everyone you bumped in along the way is just an immediate wall of fury.
Came over to you.
Yeah, "Oh, nice bike, mate." And I just go, why are you asking? Pack off, rather than, "Oh, yeah, let me tell you about my bike if you've got a bike too." But I think we made the decision to carry on at that point. It was more of a get over it. Get over the fact that something shit happens. And then Charlie span it as, "I don't want that to be the case. I want a happy ending for you guys," is what he said.
Yeah, he wanted to help us restore our faith, I think.
He didn't want us to go away feeling like that, just constantly travelling with complete distrust in everyone around you is horrible for the time that we did it. I was very hesitant, and to answer your question, it was a few days. We decided to spend some time relaxing after that and not moving everywhere each day. And he suggested it, and I said, no, I don't want any publicity about it. I don't want to make
You felt guilty.
I don't want to feel like I don't like asking for help. I don't like asking for support. And so I was quite resistant to it. And
Charlie was very good because, he was very good at just saying, you guys do deserve it, and we're not telling people they have to do it. It's up to them. It's their choice.
It was extremely powerful.
So he suggests a GoFundMe page, and he sets it up. Just tell us again. So in the first 24 hours...
For the Valuroma was the first 3 hours, it was over $1,000, and we'd hit our goals within a day or two. At that point, I was like, we should turn it off.
So how does it work? You set a goal, and you sort of do you make the goal public?
Yeah, and then it went past it, and I was like, I was like, we should switch it off. And at this point, I'm like, well, if people want to support you and they want to share in your story, then you shouldn't stop them. You're presuming that you'll have that, how to describe that?
It was very interesting accepting gratitude and gifts from people that you'd never met or never will probably meet, because instantly I think a lot of people would experience this if this happened to them, is that you kind of feel like you're not good enough, kind of feeling of, oh no, not silly old me. And that was the biggest sort of...
There's two parts to people giving things. There's the part that everybody wanted to enable you to carry on doing your trip, so we can all kind of live a little bit vicariously through your adventures and your excellent Instagram account. But there's also the fact that, and it took me probably until I had kids to realise this, but giving is possibly even more enjoyable than receiving gift, because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good that you've done something and contributed something. Your total currently stands at £8,746.
It has by far superseded the material loss. Can it compensate? It doesn't need to, because I think actually everyone's giving has turned it from, as we were alluding to before, what would have been a negative experience in isolation to me feeling really shit and hating everyone and everyone I met along the way, to actually more than restoring our faith in humanity. So for those that gave, not just thank you for the number on paper and that financial help along the way and replacing what we have lost, but thank you for that experience. Thank you for being part of that.
People are just so great, right? That's just... yeah.
Well, I think for people who gave, to hear you say that makes it worth every penny that they gave, really. That's value for money.
Just for you fucking tightwad. And anyway, you can now scrap that DRZ and get CRF. That's not going to keep breaking down all the time. You've relaxed for a few days in a lake in Guatemala, and you decide to carry on your journey. So tell us a little bit more about the journey from there on in.
We actually spent more than a few days on Lake Asadlan. We spent a few days with a new friend of ours. We spent a week learning Spanish, which turned into 2 weeks. And then we went north and met some more overlanders before turning around again.
We met so many people.
We are not the only ones by a margin. There is loads of people. Guys, get out there and do it. From Guatemala, we headed south. After this, we were already realising we were no way going to make it to Argentina before the weather's turned and the weddings came.
But I think we were happy by that decision.
We were happy that relief had been taken off us, and then when we realised that we didn't need to do it in one go, if our life dictated that, then it took the pressure off. Just getting to Panama as a very obvious juncture to stop.
You're back for the wedding. The wedding's fairly soon, isn't it, I think?
Yes, it's in 2 weeks' time. I'm the maid of honour.
And then you're heading back.
Middle of August, hopefully. It feels incredibly quick how much time has already been.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're saving some monies. But yes, we hope to go and start back off in Colombia, in Bogota.
Yep.
And that's where the bikes are in Colombia at the moment. So you rejoin your bikes and then carry on south, right?
We're actually in Panama City, but they will join us in Bogota when we fly.
Who are the bikes with, and how did you find them?
If anyone's geography isn't too brilliant, there's the major obstacle for going Alaska to Argentina is the Darien Gap, conveniently placed in the middle, which is an 80-kilometre stretch of very dense jungle that's just inhabited by the cartel and migrant trekking routes with no road through it. Your options are to go over it or around it, and so there is a wonderful company called the Overland Embassy who have taken the duty to help everyone everyone, not just motorcyclists, but other overlanders as well, get their vehicles across the Darien. So they get shipped up and sent over. And they also have a very nice warehouse where you can cancel your import duties and etc. And they'll help you with the paperwork.
How long is this second part of the trip going to be, do you think? How long have you given yourself?
6 to 8 months, as long as our money will stretch us.
Have you ever heard the story about how Scotland got involved with the Darien Gap?
I haven't. I'd love to hear it, actually.
Just Google Scotland Darien Gap. Quite a long time ago, Scotland put a lot of money into building a road through it, and it failed. In the 1690s, this was going on.
But also, listen to our episode with Dylan Sam Wickerama and watch his film. He's the guy that turned his BMW GS into a raft.
I've heard about this guy.
That could be Plan B.
Don't do it. He's lucky to be alive, I reckon.
One of my favourite YouTube videos is, I'm going to mispronounce his name completely, but it's Piers Hilgerson, if I got that right. He's a Swedish guy who went through the gap on his bike a long time ago. 80s, best guess. Complete stab in the dark there. But he details how he just had to push it through, slashing his way with machetes. Details how he had to get stabbed in the bum with some antibiotics on the other side because he got hundreds of bee stings that got infected.
And some people tried to do it recently with KLRs, didn't they? Was that an army team or something?
All their clutches were burnt out within 3 days or something like that.
Yeah, and some of the bikes are still there. They had to just leave them.
Yeah, they gave up carrying the bikes a certain way, then they went, fuck this, and walked out. Dylan Wickerama, When the Road Ends is the film. It's on YouTube and it's free. Well worth a watch. And he's on season 4, episode 10 of our podcast as well. To spoil the story, his raft is floating out to sea. He doesn't know where he is. He's got 2 compasses. He's got like one that only works if you're going above 7 miles an hour. And he's got this other little fucking toy compass that doesn't work because there's too much metal on his raft. So he doesn't know which direction he's going. He's running out of fuel, or he doesn't want to run out of fuel. So he's like, I'll just wait until I can work out where I am. Or a boat comes along and can tell me where I am. And then this pod of dolphins just starts swimming around his raft, and he thinks, I think they want me to follow them. So he starts following this pod of dolphins. About the 3rd morning, he wakes up and he can see land. And the dolphins fuck off. Incredible. And he's got it all on camera as well.
Now he's spoiled the film for you. Still go and watch it. That's just what he does. I must say, it does put into perspective. I once put in an article for Overland magazine, and pretty much at the centre of the article was the fact that I'd got my little mini camping stove stolen from a campsite in Reykjavik. That now doesn't seem much of a big deal, really. But, it did get me in a magazine article, so God knows how far you can go with this.
One of the things about travelling that I've really noticed is that things come along, you'll have one plan and then something will come along and me and Nick kind of give each other the look and we go, oh, it looks like we're changing our plans.
We realise that if something presents itself, you have to follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We had once, where was it, in Costa Rica? We'd picked up a Canadian guy who ride with us for a few days at the border. He wanted to show us some dirt. And then we were heading for the main city. The guy just pulls up and just goes, hey, where are you guys going? You're overlanding. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm the king of overland. I'm like, cool. And I thought he was a bit big of himself. And he was just like, guys, look, if you need a place to stay, come back to mine. I've got a pool. and just like, can you have some drinks? It's all cool.
He had a pool and peacocks.
And I was just like, yeah, okay. And I was like, I've got no red flags with this guy. It seems all right. And we kind of all looked at each other. I'm like, oh, we've got to get up this volcano. Sorry. We have to get up the volcano by dark. And we rode away and I turned around and I'm like, why do we have to get up the volcano by dark? We don't have to go to the volcano by dark. And then I just give him a call. I'm like, sorry, mate. Yeah, we're just down the road next petrol station. We're thinking maybe it would be nice to say hi, actually, and have a drink. It turns out he's got fingers in pies and importing vehicles in and out and helps all sorts of overlanders move vehicles around the country. And so he's like, yeah, you guys can stay for free, swim in the pool, have some wine. I'm like, oh,
and the Canadian guy loved it. He stayed with him for a whole week.
Yeah.
I've had little interactions like that with people, and I'm still friends with them, on the internet. 10 years later. It's lovely.
And yet I invite you around for dinner and you won't come.
Yes. Oh, just one more thing, Nick. I've got a terrible pain in my shoulder.
Yeah.
Well, I did say that was going to be a good episode. And I think you'll agree that was an amazing episode and an amazing story. Hats off to everybody, especially Charlie, that helped them in their moment of need. And I guess the really positive thing to come out of that is they will be on their way back to Central America any day now. So I want to wish those guys all the very best for their future travels. It was fantastic to meet you both, and long may it continue. Right, until next time. I'm not sure when that is. Summer, holidays, festivals, bike weekends. It's all getting in the way, but we'll get back to it as soon as we can. See you next time. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.